So when we moved into the outskirts of the city and I started going to Kramer Middle School, Wyndham High School, I really wasn't ready for the culture shock. My parents had raised me to turn the other cheek, and you only have so many of those. I convinced my mom to let me join the wrestling team, and as I started to develop physically, I really started lashing out. And I remember there's this big kid named Wilfredo. He was the captain of the football team, and they used to walk around and just punch the freshmen coming in right in the midsection, and they got me one day. And the kid who did it to me was the captain of the football team, but he was on crutches, so I felt like I had an advantage because of that. I was so angry, and he went in through the cafeteria doors to get his food, and I waited for him to come through the lunch line. So he had a tray plus crutches, and I remember him coming through those double doors, and the whole cafeteria could see what was about to happen, and I wailed him as hard as I could between his legs, and he fell face forward, dropped his crutches, fell into his food. The whole lunchroom started laughing at him, and I felt pretty proud of myself for about 10 seconds before he started calling all his friends, and they all started getting up from the lunch table. And I remember booking it out of school and running all the way 2 or 3 miles home. I started getting in trouble all the time. I got kicked off the bus. I wasn't even allowed to ride the bus. The way I understood my life was falling apart. My parents moved me to a Christian school because they thought I was really making bad decisions at public school, and I even spent a short time in a mental hospital. Man, I felt like my whole life was just trash. And during that month, I got invited to a meeting, and whether or not this evangelist calls a young person out of a crowd at every meeting or not, I don't know. I just know he called me out of the crowd and basically said that there was leadership all over me. I didn't take responsibility for anything at that point in time. I never wanted to be called on in class. I just kind of wanted to have no opinion and exist and do my own thing. So when this guy called me out, and not only called me to relationship with Jesus Christ, but called me into leadership, I was stunned, and I was intrigued, and I was scared. And over those next few weeks, as I wrestled with those challenges, I started to get to know the Lord. I started falling in love with who God was. I had a hard time shaking that feeling that He was in charge of everything, even with this injustice that I saw and the wrong things in the world. Even when I was at my lowest points and considering suicide, that's what stopped me, is I didn't want to face God in that state of despair. I didn't want to meet Him and not be ready. It wasn't long before the conviction of sin started setting in my heart. And I remember thinking, man, I've done so much wrong these last few years. I've shamed my parents, I've shamed myself, I've hurt people, and I need to make some kind of declaration. Maybe that was my crossing over to manhood right then in that pocket, because I remember going to see my dad, and he was up at the church in a little prayer meeting with another guy, and I remember walking in and disrupting their circle, and my dad kind of looking up shocked, like, what are you doing here? And I remember saying to him, Dad, I've done wrong, and I'm really sorry. I said, I think it's time for me to give my life to Christ. And I remember him saying, he's like, well, all that heaviness, give your life to the Lord, and the Lord's gonna forgive your sin. And the need to confess. I remember saying, Dad, here's all the stuff I do. Here's the music I listen to. I was going to go down the whole list and just clear the conscience. And my dad just kind of stopped me after the second thing, and he was like, son, if God doesn't remember anymore, I don't even need to hear this. You're forgiven, son. The Lord loves you. I love you. And I remember him hugging me, and I remember weeping. That was the turning point. That's how I came to know the Lord.